The Marvel Cinematic Universe is a franchise that spans 10 years and 20 movies and shows no signs of slowing down. We've been given some gems like Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers, but we've also gotten Thor the Dark World and Ant-Man and the Wasp. While Marvel Studios is totally capable of delivering movie masterpieces to us, they've also put out some below-average and utterly passable movies. But is it fair to call any of these films terrible? Yes, at least one. The MCU's worst movies are, arguably, The Incredible Hulk, Thor the Dark World, Black Panther, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. These four are easily the weakest additions to the MCU, but only one of them takes the cake. And it's Black Panther. I strongly believe that Black Panther is the worst movie the MCU has to offer. But, instead of throwing around arguments and opinions without proper substantiation in a bite-sized video essay, this video will take the form of a critique of Black Panther as a whole and will, therefore, be quite long. So I'll leave the timestamps to the different sections of the video in the description and on screen now. My first viewing of Black Panther in cinemas left me disappointed. Upon my second viewing, pen and paper in hand in order to make notes, I enjoyed the movie far more. I've now seen Black Panther 5 times and am convinced it is the worst movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And without further ado, here's why. We first see our protagonist, T'Challa, the Black Panther, aboard a high-tech Wakandan jet headed for Nakia, his ex. But this isn't the first time we meet T'Challa or his feline alter ego. That was Civil War. So, for context, T'Challa and his father T'Chaka were attending a summit in Vienna to ratify the Sokovia Accords. A bomb went off killing T'Chaka, and T'Challa donned his vibranium-laden panther costume to hunt down those responsible for his father's death. Now that we're all caught up, a news broadcast aboard the jet reveals to the audience that the events of Civil War took place mere days before this scene in Black Panther. T'Challa is likely still mourning the loss of his father and beloved king. As we soon learn, T'Challa is en route to his ex, Nakia, because he wants her to be present for his coronation ceremony. This is pretty selfish considering Nakia is currently undercover on a secret mission infiltrating some type of human trafficking operation. We later learn that Wakanda has spies embedded all around the globe. Despite T'Challa botching Nakia's espionage mission and killing all but one of her possible leads, she brushes it off and holds his hand on the plane trip home. We are shown that the main city of Wakanda is hidden behind a force field that projects an image of mountains and forests to any surrounding onlookers. But wait, before they hit the force field, there were people waving at the jet. These people must be Wakandan, as only Wakandans, and one other guy, know about Wakanda. But they're riding horses and farming sheep. Wakanda is the most futuristic nation in the world. Why do these people appear to be living in third world conditions? Are they decoys, designed to give the image of third world culture to outsiders? What a crappy job. Did they at least volunteer to live like peasants? Back to the story. The jet lands and we meet T'Challa's sister, Shuri, a snarky, progressive young genius, and T'Challa's mother, Angela Bassett. Shuri asks T'Challa for his gadgets and after a short back and forth states, "Just because something works does not mean it cannot be improved." This turns out to be a central theme of the movie, as Wakanda is a marvelous success of a state, but could be better. This progressive ideology is echoed by Nakia and Killmonger as well. Speaking of whom, we are then taken to London, where Eric Killmonger, who will become the villain of the movie, robs a museum of a vibranium artifact with help from Ulysses Klaue. Remember him? The cuttlefish guy?
Disco lights.
This scene hits on an awkward note when, before the actual robbery takes place, Killmonger confronts a museum worker about how her ancestors took the museum items in the same way he will take them back. Unfairly. What is the point of this entire conversation? To convince you of the narrative that, somehow, the actions of people today can rectify the misdeeds of their ancestors. Therefore, people should be held accountable for what their ancestor did hundreds of years ago? Go on, movie, keep making sense. We are then taken to T'Challa's coronation ceremony, which is actually just a fight under a waterfall. Wait, why does his crowning ceremony involve fighting? Oh, because the throne is decided by ritual combat. Oh, okay, wait, what? Leadership of the most technologically advanced country on the planet is decided by two people pummeling each other? What could possibly go wrong? How about someone who is twice as strong, scary, and stupid as T'Challa comes along, kills him on the waterfall, and then has total control of Wakanda? a country with a malleable, bulletproof space metal, spies in every government on the planet, and glowing lip tattoos. Over the centuries of Wakanda's existence, nobody has stood up for the idea of ruling Wakanda based on intellect or virtue or anything beyond capacity for ass-kicking? Really? Or, you know what, maybe they meet every year and decide that ritual combat is still the best option available. The most advanced nation ever to exist, and yet common sense escapes them. We are told that, for the fight to be fair, T'Challa will be stripped of his Black Panther powers. His heightened strength, senses, and agility will be taken away. This is problematic because we have no idea how or why T'Challa had his powers during Civil War. T'Challa seems to have had the powers since before he appeared on screen, but why? How? His father was still king, and yet he was allowed to wear the suit. In the comics, the Black Panther is the king, the greatest fighter in the nation, and sole owner to the right to wear the suit. So why are these traits suddenly split between father and son? This is only a problem because of the logic introduced in Black Panther. Nothing was confusing in Civil War, but I digress. Nobody challenges T'Challa until the Mountain Tribe appear from a cave, and their leader, M'Baku, berates T'Challa for letting his dad die and leaving Wakanda's science industry under the guidance of Shuri, his 16-year-old sister. He might have a point about that second thing. T'Challa and M'Baku fight, T'Challa outskills the man and commands him to yield because his people need a leader. Although T'Challa ultimately wins, he is left bruised and battered and in no state to continue fighting. What stops another challenger from beating T'Challa while he's down? It seems like a really easy path to the throne at this point. T'Challa gets his powers back by means of the heart-shaped herb and visits his dad on the ancestral plane. Touching moment. We are then taken to the only view of Wakandan street life we get for the whole movie, and it's pretty underwhelming. Our only indications of modern or advanced society are a maglev train and a hover car. But don't worry, apparently they also have hover bikes.
Well, you guys have hover bikes?
In between the double-story hut-like buildings are dirt roads and Wakandan citizens wearing an odd combination of modern and primitive clothing. Overall, one gets the impression of a third-world, Eastern-styled marketplace. It seems that the train tracks and hover car are the only things even remotely advanced about Wakandan urban life. T'Challa and Nakia are walking through these streets, conversing about Wakanda's purpose in the world. Nakia believes that Wakanda is strong enough to share their advancements with the rest of the world while retaining their cultural integrity. So T'Challa outright dismisses her proposal and continues flirting with her.
If you are not so stubborn, you would make a great queen.
I would make a great queen because I am so stubborn.
If that's what I wanted.
One transition shot later, we're meeting the Border Tribe, led by Wakabi, a close friend of T'Challa's. Before we get to the convo, let's address the elephant in the room. There are absolutely no technological advancements to be found among the Border Tribesmen. They live in huts and farm chickens and rhinos. No, you heard me right. They farm rhinos as if they were cattle. Is there anything special about these rhinos? Nothing besides them being poorly rendered. Honestly, there is something rotten in the state of Wakanda. Within the hologram force field, people live in skyscrapers and have access to maglev trains, while outside this first world bubble, these Wakandans live in abject poverty. Did their ancestors do something wrong for which they are currently paying the price? Or are they genuinely comfortable living as peasants? For a so-called utopia, Wakanda seems quite concerned with class-based divisions. T'Challa tells Wakabi of Nakia's desire for Wakanda to branch out, to which Wakabi replies, "You let the refugees in, they bring their problems with them." The only reason the writers included these socio-political ideas in the script is so that they can either confirm or debunk them later in the film. This movie has no timeless message or commentary to share with its viewers. Just pandering and commentary relevant only to today's political fads. Things I'd rather have left out of my movies completely. Wakabi then unironically offers to wage war on the rest of the world as to eliminate any threat to Wakanda's supremacy. T'Challa humbly denies the offer just to remind you that he's the good guy and modern cinema has no grasp of nuance. Okoye, the general of the King's Guard, informs them that Klaue has popped up on the radar, and so they convene in the throne room to discuss Klaue's capture. Wakabi reveals his vengeful anger towards Klaue, and T'Challa promises that he will either kill Klaue or bring him back to Wakanda. So much for that. We are then treated to an aerial shot of Wakanda's research laboratory and shown that it is built around and into the country's vibranium mine. As revealed in the prologue, millions of years ago a meteor struck Africa and began affecting the plant life, giving rise to the heart-shaped herb, which bestows the Black Panther powers on whoever ingests it. That meteor housed the Earth's entire supply of vibranium, and it appears to be the only reason that Wakanda is so advanced. Underground, Shuri welcomes T'Challa into her lab. Yes, she is in control of Wakanda's entire scientific industry, and she appears to be the only one working on anything significant. She makes a cringy, outdated dead meme reference and proceeds to give T'Challa super stealthy Back to the Future shoes, which she calls sneakers. I'm sorry, but what is Shuri's purpose, from a writing perspective, besides being unfunny, disrespectful, and depriving T'Challa of meaningful moments? Guess we'll have to wait and see. She shows T'Challa her new Black Panther suit design, capable of absorbing, storing, and dispelling kinetic energy, and embarrasses him for the lulz. So, next the Korea scene happens, and I'm gonna skip critiquing it, at least 90% of it, because frankly, it doesn't belong in the movie. It doesn't really achieve anything or contain any meaningful payoffs. Much like Canto Bight in The Last Jedi, it feels tacked on and unnecessary. There are, however, some things worth mentioning. During the car chase sequence, Okoye remarks at how primitive guns are from within a bulletproof car. All irony is evidently lost to her as she goes through the entire movie only brandishing a spear. Once again, Wakanda proves to be a paradoxical location. It is undeniably the most advanced civilization on the face of the earth, yet its people live in huts and its warriors use spears. Wakanda shifts from futuristic utopia to primitive mudhole whenever it suits the narrative. There is no consistency here to be found. The most consistent aspect of Wakanda seems to be how often it contradicts its own nature. The Korea scene also reintroduces us to Agent Ross, another returning character from Civil War. After the car chase, Ross takes the gang with him to a safe house where they interrogate Claw before Killmonger shows up and unkidnaps him. In the commotion, Ross takes a bullet for Nakia, so T'Challa decides to take him back to Wakanda with them so that they can heal him. Another of Shuri's unfunny jokes later, and T'Challa must now tell W'Kabi of how he broke his promise. W'Kabi is disappointed, but don't worry, Killmonger turns on Claw, only now for whatever reason, and delivers his body to W'Kabi shortly. T'Challa then confronts Zuri, a precious family friend, about a family ring he saw around Killmonger's neck in Korea. After a heated argument, Zuri reveals that T'Challa and Killmonger are first cousins. T'Chaka and Killmonger's dad were brothers, but after N'Jobu stole vibranium to use in the struggle in America, T'Chaka confronted him. N'Jobu drew a gun on Zuri, who was sent there to spy on him, and T'Chaka killed him. This twist is well executed and does carry significant weight with the viewer. Sadly, it doesn't make sense. Zuri claims that he and T'Chaka needed to maintain the lie, and so they left Lil Eric in California to grow up without a dad? What? N'Jobu threatened their lives. T'Chaka killed him out of self-defense. He has no reason to feel guilt. Remorse, maybe, but they make it out as if this was the only acceptable option. Leave Eric in America, return to Wakanda, and wouldn't the Wakandans want to know what happened to their king's brother? How did they maintain the lie to every Wakandan citizen? By silencing anyone who spoke out about it? This is ridiculous. Moreover, they didn't have to leave Eric there with no father or claim to power. They willingly added guilt to their consciences by choosing to leave Eric behind. This is terrible writing and possibly the first example, in the movie, of characters making stupid decisions in order to further the plot. Killmonger then meets the Border Tribe in order to deliver Claw's body to W'Kabi, and wait, how the hell did Killmonger know that Claw's death would gain him favor with W'Kabi? Awfully convenient that Claw just so happened to kill the parents of the future leader of the tribe entrusted to guard Wakanda's perimeter from outsiders, isn't it? Killmonger even has the glowing lip tattoo. Shouldn't that be enough to get into Wakanda all on its own? It's almost as if Claw's entire purpose in this movie was to die in order to reveal the real villain of the movie and gain him W'Kabi's trust. A bit too convenient for my liking, but whatever, it can't get any worse, can it? Well, remember that whole ritual combat thing? It kinda backfires. I mean, T'Challa beat M'Baku fair and square. T'Challa won in ritual combat during his coronation ceremony. By their own rules, T'Challa is the rightful king. He does not need to accept Killmonger's challenge. This is yet another example of characters making stupid decisions for the sake of advancing the plot. Killmonger kills Zuri, throws T'Challa off the waterfall, and takes the throne. Because somehow being a proficient mercenary also makes him an expert in sword and spear combat. Now that a bloodthirsty mercenary has ascended to the throne, our gang, consisting of 3 strong independent women, and Ross, goes into exile. But not before Nakia steals one of the heart-shaped herb. Killmonger visits the ancestral plane and then becomes a full-fledged despot by burning all the remaining heart-shaped herbs so that nobody can challenge his rule. Then comes the scene in which we get possibly the most characterization for Killmonger in the whole movie. Killmonger sits on the throne and asks the heads of the tribes around him why Wakanda didn't help black revolutions in other parts of the world. They remain silent. Killmonger states that he knows how colonizers think, and that he'll use their strategy against them, arming oppressed people all over the world so that they can kill those in power, their children, and any dissidents. He wants the world to start over with them on top. What does Killmonger mean by colonizers or oppressed? He doesn't specify, and he doesn't need to. In the current political climate, the average person understands quite well what is meant by those terms. Again, the writers choose to cater to political and ideological dynamics of today, instead of saying something about society that would stand the test of time. Black Panther will not age well. This pandering is one of the biggest reasons why Black Panther fails as a movie. Sure, the message of oppressor versus oppressed resonates with a great many people for now, but once the political climate changes to reflect a different narrative, the character of Killmonger, and the movie as a whole, will become irrelevant. Next, we see our gang roaming the snow-covered mountains of Wakanda, somewhere out of sight from central Wakanda, but not too far because they did walk there. Geography aside, Angela Bassett suggests that Nakia take the herb herself instead of them offering it to M'Baku. Shuri took one of the necklaces that turns into a Black Panther suit, so technically, Nakia has everything she needs to stand a chance against Killmonger. But she states that she is a spy with no army and so wouldn't stand a chance, even though those are literally the same odds T'Challa has in the final battle. So, yet again, characters making nonsensical choices to push the plot forward. And then the mountain tribesmen ambush and capture them. After offering M'Baku a chance at the heart-shaped herb, he takes our gang to see a comatose T'Challa who a mountain tribe fisherman found, and they're keeping him alive in a bed of snow. Not magic snow or vibranium snow, just snow. Does the mountain tribe know something we don't about the medicinal properties of snow? Anyway, they feed T'Challa the flower juice, he tells his spirit dad that he must rectify his wrongs, and wakes up. Oh, he's alive. T'Challa asks M'Baku to join him in the fight to retake Wakanda. M'Baku says no. But don't worry, he doesn't really mean it. Meanwhile, Killmonger is hard at work preparing to ship vibranium weaponry to war dogs around the world. T'Challa rudely interrupts this blossoming dictator's moment of pride, stating that because he did not yield or die, the challenge is incomplete. This gives the King's Guard reason to turn on Killmonger, so T'Challa isn't completely alone, although he was never going to be. W'Kabi commands the border tribesmen to charge T'Challa. Now, remember when I said they appeared to be living in abject poverty earlier on? Yeah. Well, I was wrong. These dudes have vibranium sewn into their cloaks, so the cloaks will, on command, materialize shields. T'Challa just jumps over them, but I'm sure they work better on regular people. I don't really see how poncho shields would help rhino farmers in day-to-day life, but at this point I think it's better to let the movie do the thinking for me. Shuri, Nakia, and Ross somehow evade capture on their way to the lab, where the girls get geared up and Ross takes remote control of a Wakandan jet in order to stop the transport ships from leaving Wakanda. By the way, I feel it is kind of worth mentioning at this point, why didn't Shuri take both necklaces? At least then Killmonger would only have access to a suit that is incapable of collecting and dispelling kinetic energy, but whatever, color-coded characters look cool. T'Challa tackles Killmonger into the mine, where they end up on one of the railways designed for transporting raw vibranium. Earlier in the movie, Shuri mentions that the railway deactivates the vibranium as it is too dangerous to be transported in its raw form at that speed. T'Challa tells Shuri to activate the track, knowing full well that his suit's vibranium will be deactivated too. I find it strange that the track is meant to suppress vibranium's properties, but the way this manifests on the characters' suits suggests that some parts of their suits are active, others aren't, and the amount of surface area covered by the suits changes randomly. Alternatively, wouldn't the suits just return to their housing in the necklaces? Or wouldn't the suits remain covering their entire bodies and just cease being bulletproof? Why do the suits become a Ripley combination of active and inactive while the track is activated? Because a hard-stab killshot looks cool? Yeah, why not? Meanwhile, Ross chases down and destroys the remaining jets, and the girls fight off the border tribe until M'Baku and his army come out of nowhere to help, despite stating that they wouldn't. Please, movie, at least make it look like you're trying to make sense. Ross's death is baited, but he survives because pre-Infinity War MCU has no understanding of stakes. The border tribe is defeated and T'Challa pulls off a miraculous killing blow against Killmonger, although they still have enough time to walk out of the mine to where they have a view of the sunset. Killmonger then asks to be buried with his ancestors who jumped from slave ships because they knew that death was better than bondage. Here's another prime look into Killmonger's mind. He believes that the slaves who jumped ship during the slave trade are his ancestors purely because they share a skin color. It's not clear how long Wakandans have had the lip tattoos, but Eric definitely has one, meaning that he is Wakandan. Therefore, all of his ancestors should be Wakandan. Considering Wakanda remained hidden during the scramble for Africa and slave trade, I think it's safe to say that no Wakandan was ever made a slave. Therefore, none of Killmonger's ancestors were slaves. Nakia and T'Challa flirt some more, and the movie closes with an Oakland youth asking T'Challa who he is. The post-credit scene shows us that T'Challa is opening Wakanda to the rest of the world for the first time in its history. Just like Nakia suggested. To all the people out there who support the idea that Killmonger was right, just remember that he was a bloodthirsty despot and Nakia had a better version of his philosophy in mind from the beginning of the movie. I have a lot to say about Black Panther's main character, but first I feel it essential to acknowledge that this is not the first time we see T'Challa on the big screen. That was Civil War, and oh man, was he great. What the hell happened? Some of you may say that comparing Civil War T'Challa to Black Panther T'Challa is unfair because they are two separate movies with different directors, etc. It doesn't matter. Each additional movie in the MCU is a sequel to the previous one by virtue of them taking place in the same universe, whether the character roster changes or not. In 3 quotes, we get more characterization for T'Challa in Civil War than in all of Black Panther.
I am not my father. Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me.
I'm glad.
I don't care.
Civil War makes T'Challa out to be a dutiful, fair, driven, intimidating badass. In Civil War, T'Challa is a strong character. But in his own movie, after we first see him in action, he totally stitches out when he sees Nakia.
Nakia. Hi.
Oh, how?
To the movie's credit, though, T'Challa does not joke, jest, bant, or quip. They got that aspect of his character right, at least. I understand that the contexts of the 2 movies are different, but why does it seem that T'Challa's character changes so radically between the 2 movies? In Civil War, he's seeking revenge for his father's death, and in Black Panther, he is fighting to save Wakanda and the world from Killmonger's rule. These are 2 sets of very grave circumstances. So why was T'Challa a strong, silent force to be reckoned with in one case and an unconfident failure in the other? Shuri, T'Challa's 16-year-old sister who has complete control over Wakanda's tech enterprise. Shuri provides T'Challa with gadgets, heals Agent Ross's spinal injury, and makes jokes. We are shown that she is competent, capable, and utterly unlikable. She constantly deprives T'Challa of meaningful moments and makes jokes that are never in good taste.
Don't scare me like that, colonizer.
The archetype of a young, snarky genius is not easy to pull off, but let me identify one important aspect of said archetype that helps the character be more likable and compelling for the audience. When a sarcastic, witty young genius makes a joke or proves their supremacy, it feels earned. If we, the audience, know for a fact that that little rascal on screen can back up their smack talk, we support them and revel in the fact that nobody can truly challenge their intellect. So my question is, when did Shuri prove herself? When did she show that all of her quips and jabs at T'Challa were earned? If at all, we should have seen this happen at the beginning of the movie, but as far as I can see, we have no reason to believe that Shuri deserves the supremacy she so readily flaunts. The movie just puts her in front of us and expects us to back her because the manner in which Shuri's character is portrayed robs her of any meaningful growth or development and robs the audience of what could have been a compelling character. This is a bit extra, but it is relevant. Remember in Infinity War when Shuri totally wrecked Bruce about Vision's design flaw and the movie made it out to be a gotcha moment? Again, when did she earn this? We know Bruce Banner. Maybe we don't love him, but he has never given the audience reason to doubt his abilities, until Shuri took this jab. If anything, Shuri has proven to be undeserving of her status in the MCU and given us more than enough reason to feel contempt for her. Shuri is unfunny and utterly unlikable. People behind the scenes of Black Panther admitted that M'Baku is kind of a problematic character. For those of you who don't know, in the source material, M'Baku is the villain known as Man-Ape. Producer Nate Moore said that there are racial implications they'd rather avoid, so they just call him M'Baku. That's nice. Good job to all you people behind the scenes for not racially charging the characters in a movie that aimed to unite previously oppressed people of the world. It's a shame you had to go and ruin that sentiment by having several black men hoot like baboons at a white man who spoke out of turn.
The new king.
Mrs. Obama, I've done it. I've stopped racism.
Eric Killmonger is a racist, warmongering psychopath with dictatorial aspirations. He might have been accurate about Wakanda's apathy to Africa's problems in the past, but he was totally unjustified in believing that having black people rule over the rest of the world, by virtue of nothing more than their skin color, would somehow make amends for injustices such as slavery or Jim Crow. Killmonger is not relatable or complex. To all the people praising Killmonger as an empathetic and philosophical villain, did you miss the parts of the movie when he condemns people based on their race, threatens to police thought, and explicitly promises to kill children? The character of Killmonger is nothing more than a symptom of people's proclivity to pander and virtue signal for easy brownie points with minorities. And this segues perfectly into the next section. Unless you lived under a rock in early 2018, you know that Black Panther was lauded as a great leap forward for diversity and representation in cinema. The film was so beloved by journalists and online personalities that it was called a cultural milestone and received 10 out of 10 reviews across the board. Before anyone even saw it. Are you a racist? No? Well, just to be sure, you'd better empty the cinemas of all white people so that their whiteness doesn't ruin the experience for all those who feel that their existences have been validated by the movie. Seriously, Black Panther is, at best, a 6 out of 10, and yet people are acting as if it's ushered in some new era of prosperity for black people. Did they forget that the civil rights movement ended in the 1960s and was a massive success? These so-called activists aren't fighting for anything. They're whining because their pathetic excuse of a movement isn't getting as much attention as MLK did. It's as though people have completely forgotten what the civil rights movement achieved. At one point, it was considered altruistic to judge people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. Killmonger doesn't agree with that, and the people praising Black Panther find him to be a relatable character. Odd. Speaking of old Eric, early in the movie he berates a museum worker for how her ancestors stole the artifacts present. This is racism, plain and simple. For all Killmonger knows, the only thing that this woman and Western colonizers have in common is skin color, a physical trait that is beyond our control. Attributing the actions of an individual's ancestors to their character is racist. On principle, calling a random white person a colonizer is no different to calling a random black person a cotton picker. This is a racial double standard to which fans of Black Panther are likely oblivious. Not only does Killmonger assume the worst of this woman, but also believes that 1. People of the same race have overwhelming inherent similarities, and 2. That people could be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors. Could Killmonger get any more racist? He openly advocates for Earth being conquered by an all-black empire. We can assume that by we, Killmonger means black people, despite the fact that Wakandans have segregated themselves from other black people for who knows how long. Worst case scenario, Killmonger supports the idea of having a purely Wakandan empire rule over the rest of the world. And I know that that's not what he vocally supports, but it would be the last piece of damning evidence needed to make the argument that Killmonger is literally Hitler. Advocates for ethnostate? Check. Believes that people should be responsible for the actions of their ancestors? Check. But Hitler didn't just want a kingdom of white people. He wanted a Reich of Aryan people. A true historical case of intra-racial racism. If Killmonger wanted only Wakandans ruling over everyone else, then the picture would be complete. But hey, listen, I don't know about you guys, but 2 out of 3 is enough for me. Ross has good reason to believe that Wakanda is a third world nation, because, in fact, a decent chunk of it is. Wakanda was praised as a model nation for equality and inclusivity, and yet it is heavily concerned with tribal and class-based divisions. Wakanda was praised as an example of what Africa could have been if not for the ravages of colonialism, but people forget that they never got Ethiopia. For Wakanda's entire history, it has been an ethno-nationalist, pro-wall, traditionalist, anti-immigration, anti-democracy, trade-restricted, absolute monarchy with no sign of freedom or human rights, whose ruler is decided by blood right or bloodshed. Think I'm wrong? Wakanda has a force field around itself that not only incinerates intruders but also hides the utopia from onlookers. Only Wakandans are allowed to live in Wakanda. Wakanda does not allow tourists or trade their vast amount of vibranium. The throne is decided by ritual combat. Even if a king decided to institute a system of rights similar to what the civilized world has today, any roided-up lunatic could throw them off the waterfall and declare Wakanda a dictatorship overnight. Everything that Wakanda stood for, up until the events of the movie, is what the alt-right stands for today. Wakanda is a space-age ethno-state with a massive wall around it guarded by elite warriors. Everything that Richard Spencer dreams of. Wakanda achieved its level of advancement under alt-right principles. You cannot assert that Wakanda is a great nation without conceding that it became great by practicing alt-right doctrine. To believe that Wakanda is great is to believe that alt-right ideology is great. Remember, since Black Panther's release, it has been praised to death by people who adore its depiction of a so-called African utopia. The same people are probably blissfully unaware of Wakanda's radical history and love it simply for its intersectional messagery. Nevertheless, there are still those individuals who derive a deep sense of emotional fulfillment from Black Panther. The fact that so many people need an ethno-nationalist fantasy to feel better about themselves is troubling to say the least. When it comes to world building, Black Panther fails miserably. Not only is Wakanda seeping with impracticalities and contrivances, it also makes no sense according to many of its own rules. Wakanda is home to the Earth's supply of vibranium, and if you are at any point suspicious of how Wakanda became so futuristic without any of the hallmarks of a modern advanced society, the movie urges you to answer, because vibranium. In fact, vibranium seems to be the only reason Wakanda is doing well at all. Early Wakandans knew they had an edge on the rest of the world, and yet they chose to isolate. Early civilizations went out of their way to invade and conquer in order to expand their territory, but not Wakanda. Historically, isolationism has never been conducive to a healthy nation. Take China, Tasmania, or any other actual country, for example. Doesn't matter because they didn't have vibranium. Would you like to know just how redundant Wakanda gets when you dig mere inches below the surface of it all? Its citizens live as peasants with access to selectively advanced technology. Technology that remains rooted in primitive tribal norms. Spears, body mutilation, ritual combat. All hallmarks of a Stone Age society. But don't worry, they also have flying cars and skyscrapers, some of which have thatched huts sticking out of them like tumors. Imagine the architect's shock after telling him that a fraction of the skyscraper he built has caught on fire. Speaking of architects, some amount of working and middle-class workers must exist for Wakanda to look the way it does. But we never see them. Just Shuri and some street vendors. Wakanda appears static and stagnant despite many of its people still living in abject poverty. Vibranium so conveniently explains away all of their technological advances without negating their backward cultural practices. Wakanda has bulletproof suits that hide in necklaces, plants that turn people superhuman, and a monopoly on the resources that allow for this. Why is the Black Panther the only one who gets to make the most of these? The Black Panther is the most powerful individual in all of Wakanda. So why does he need the Dora Milaje? The King's Guard are the most elite warriors in Wakanda, entrusted to guard the most secure person in the country? Wakanda's entire military quote-unquote structure is redundant. The easily defeatable border tribe has rhinos and cloak shields at their disposal, while the super elite Dora Milaje use spears to guard the one person in Wakanda who is undeniably hardest to kill. The heart-shaped herb is effectively a super soldier serum that is formed on a small scale and has a 100% success rate. Why wouldn't they give it to their soldiers? Or better yet, just give everyone the flower juice. it'll allow them to heal faster, live longer, and then fighters wouldn't have to take the antidote before the waterfall fight. I'm not actually advocating for every Wakandan to get the flower juice. I just like to know why only the Black Panther gets to make the most of Wakanda's plentiful resources. But maybe Wakanda's redundancies have explanations and I'm just blind to them. But how about how Wakanda stayed hidden all this time?
Though it remains one of the poorest countries in the world, fortified by mountain ranges and an impenetrable rainforest.
I'm sorry, impenetrable? She said that quite confidently, as if it is commonly accepted that Wakanda is, in fact, surrounded by an impenetrable amount of trees. Do you mean to tell me that no one at least tried to penetrate that rainforest? The tallest mountain in the world is a hotspot for thrill seekers, despite it also being a potentially fatal climb. If you tell people that a forest is impenetrable, some of them will absolutely try to navigate it. Well, what if someone did end up wandering into the forest and they just happened upon the force field? They'd probably die. I can see the headlines now. Hundreds of people go missing in Wakandan jungle, no one bats an eye because vibranium. But we know for a fact that an outsider did get in and out. Ulysses Klaue is the only in-universe non-Wakandan to know about Wakanda's true nature. This is because he somehow got into Wakanda, stole vibranium, and lived to tell the tale. But how? Wakanda has supposedly kept itself secret for centuries, but all evidence suggests they don't take it all too seriously.
You speak nothing of this day. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Really, Okoye? You think some authoritative words and a smile are enough to convince these human trafficking victims to keep their word? Sure, all they saw was a guy in a bulletproof catsuit do some acrobatics, but a Men in Black approach would be vastly preferable. I don't care what we know about vibranium, I'm sure it can erase people's memory. At this point, it would be less believable if vibranium couldn't do that. Wakandans are far too complacent with their secret keeping. After all, they let Klaue get into Wakanda, steal a marketable amount of vibranium, and get away with a brand. The secret utopia equivalent of a slap on the wrist. Because vibranium? That's just silly. As a genre, action is easily my favorite. I love action movies. For the most part, action in the MCU is well done, even if it's mostly CGI. Black Panther is no exception. The action is well done, although heavily computer animated. Black Panther's two major action sins are fighting in the dark and poorly done CGI fighting. The first fight scene of the movie sees T'Challa drop out of a jet, fall a ridiculous distance into jungle, and then take on human traffickers. In the IMAX cinema, it was almost impossible for me to discern what was happening during this fight, but if you watch this scene at night with all the lights turned off, it isn't half bad. The problem with this sort of action is that it isn't immediately clear to the audience. I had to wait over 2 months before I could get a copy of the movie, so that's 2 months during which my fondest memories of this fight scene were the few seconds in which kicks are somewhat visible. The shaky cam does not help, and overall, this fight scene doesn't hold a candle to the next one, T'Challa vs. M'Baku. The first waterfall fight blows the jungle scene out of the water. The colors are vibrant, the action is always visible, the audience has a clear understanding of the stakes, and aside from a couple odd camera angles, this fight is excellent. In terms of plot, the Korea scene is utterly insignificant, but the fight and chase aren't too shabby. The fighting begins after Okoye blows her cover, and after Nakia and T'Challa take out a few thugs, energetic music kicks in and a single take shot plays out. The camera pans around the room, showing multiple fights going on amid the chaos. As a stylistic choice, single-take shots are fantastic when done right in any genre. I'm no fan of chaotic shaky cam fights, so the more long-form, clearly visible action, the better. I will say, however, that while the single-take shot is a good technique almost inherently, this single shot does not contain much substance. The fighting isn't always in frame, and the camera's path feels arbitrary. They could have established the geography of the room better without the scene being a single take. While this long shot misses its mark, I will still give the movie props for having a single shot action scene at all. Then comes the chase scene. The music is hype, the action is always visible, Wakandan tech is actually used to full effect, and we get one of the best stunts in the movie. Of course I use the word stunt loosely. No stuntman actually got on top of a speeding car to do that, but calling this obviously computer-generated feat a stunt is not to denigrate the work of the stuntman community. I love watching the behind-the-scenes of action movies to see how stunts were performed. Even though this stunt isn't practical, it is just that, a stunt. And as for the chase scene as a whole, it might be the best executed action scene in the whole movie. Claw's breakout scene is fine, but there's really not enough action to warrant a critique of it. Same with the airstrip shootout. So next is T'Challa vs. Killmonger on the waterfall. It feels only right to compare the waterfall fight scenes as they are the best fights in the movie. In both fights, the stakes are clear, the action is great, aside from a few issues, and there is a compelling antagonist. While I have my gripes with Killmonger's psychology, he is an intimidating villain. Nowhere is he more menacing than in this scene as he delivers his villainous monologue. Michael B. Jordan's incredible physique only adds to Killmonger's on-screen presence. The waterfall fights are easily the best in the movie, but if I had to choose one on the merits of its action alone, I'd go with the first one. While Killmonger makes his fight scene far more compelling than the first, I find T'Challa's fight against M'Baku to be better choreographed. The climax. The climax of the movie is the longest action scene in and of itself. It cuts between multiple different fights taking place simultaneously. On the ground, there's the battle with the Border Tribe. In the air, Ross remote pilots a jet to destroy transport ships, and in the Vibranium mine, T'Challa and Killmonger have their not-so-epic final battle. It's the climax of the movie, and that's about it. It contains 2 of the 3 best stunts of the movie, all of which are CGI intensive, and it ties up loose ends. It's not bad, it's not great, it's just kinda meh. I'm pressed to list any merits of the climax, but oh boy can I talk about its shortcomings. The Mountain Tribe shows up out of nowhere after M'Baku explicitly states that they wouldn't help. Ross's death is teased, and would have added a sense of gravity to the movie, but amounts to nothing. And when Killmonger slits this soldier's throat, there's no blood. I know Marvel doesn't make hyperviolent movies, but this death is just awkward. Besides, if they didn't want to show blood, there are ways around it. The poorly rendered rhinos come back, Shuri somehow has time to put on face paint while the fate of the world is at stake, and Killmonger survives being stabbed in the heart just long enough to make his closing monologue. Actually, now that I think about it, Killmonger survives being stabbed in the heart until he himself pulls the blade out of his heart. How long could he have survived with that spearhead still stuck inside of him? I've already covered the sin of a fight scene taking place in darkness, and now, finally, comes the second sin: terrible CGI. From the time T'Challa tackles Killmonger into the mine, to the moment he stabs him in the heart, all of that action is CG. Poor CG at that. This climactic fight scene looks like a video game cutscene. Some of the CG in Iron Man looks better than this, and that movie released literally 10 years before Black Panther. When an audience notices that what's taking place on screen is computer-generated, they lose appreciation of the stakes and the movie loses tension. While I don't often suffer from said issue, the poor animation was enough to take me out of the experience. Again, the waterfall fights are the best fight scenes in Black Panther. This is mostly owed to execution and choreography, but the fact that they were done practically helps immensely. I almost forgot to mention that 90% of their fighting takes place while they are wearing indestructible vibranium suits. They are incapable of hurting each other right up until the final moments of the fight. I love a good super fist fight, but what do they think they're accomplishing while the suits are fully active? Same goes for the Border Tribesmen earlier on. They know how vibranium works, don't they? All in all, the action in Black Panther gets a 6.5 out of 10 from me. The action is acceptable. The CGI is tolerable, and the waterfall fights are highlights within this underwhelming film. The worst movies in the MCU are, arguably, The Incredible Hulk, Thor: The Dark World, Black Panther, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. These 4 are easily the weakest additions to the MCU. But why is it that Black Panther takes the cake? All of these movies fail in different ways, but have shortcomings all the same. Why is it that Black Panther is the worst of all? It is because Thor: The Dark World does not give us execrable world building full of redundancies and contrivances. It is because The Incredible Hulk did not have unfinished and sloppy CGI despite releasing 10 years earlier. Ant-Man and the Wasp has writing and characterization that is nowhere near as pathetic as Black Panther's. Anything that those 3 movies do wrong, Black Panther does worse. Ultimately, Black Panther is a subpar superhero movie that caters to a thriving culture of political correctness and virtue signaling. It does not feel like an MCU film and fails to develop the character of T'Challa to any significant degree. If you want to see Black Panther be well developed and compelling, go watch Civil War. Regardless of the criticism I level with the film, Black Panther will be remembered as a culturally significant beacon of hope for diversity and African unity in cinema. How sad is it that in 2019, our gold standard for promoting Black solidarity is this mediocre movie? Hello, kind viewers. I'd just like to take this time after my critique is done to say thanks for watching, especially if you got this far all in one go. You're the boss. I'd also like to take this time to say that I love debate, I love controversial discussion, I love talking about movies, so if you agree with my criticism, if you disagree with my criticism, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to read all of your feedback. And if you disagree with my criticisms of Black Panther, do you think it deserves any of the Oscars it's been nominated for? Please let me know in the comments. Constructive criticism, destructive criticism, outright bullying, it's all fair game. And lastly, I'd like to say that my next critique will be on Spider-Man Homecoming. So if you're excited for that and want to see it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring that bell so that you get notified as soon as it comes out. Considering the time it took me to make this video, and considering that I'm still figuring out the technical issues with my Elgato, I have no desire to stick to an upload schedule. The Homecoming critique will be out as soon as I can have it out. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.